What happens when a man is judged by the color of his skin instead of the contents of his character or his portfolio? On Global Wings Flight 72 from New York to Zurich, a decorated black CEO was publicly humiliated, forced from his first-class seat to make way for an entitled white passenger. It was a disgusting display of prejudice at 35,000 feet. But what the flight crew and the arrogant passenger didn't know was that their actions had just triggered a corporate tidal wave. In the time it takes to serve a drink, destinies were shattered and an empire was about to change hands. This isn't just a story about racism. It's a story about power, and how true power, when wielded with precision, delivers the most devastating karma imaginable. The Solstice Lounge at JFK's Terminal 4 was an oasis of curated tranquility. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, glinting off the polished chrome and dark mahogany of the private bar. The hushed murmur of conversation was punctuated only by the gentle clink of ice in crystal glasses and the soft rustle of newspapers. In a corner armchair facing the bustling tarmac sat Graham Wilson. To the casual observer, he was unremarkable, and he preferred it that way. Dressed in a simple, dark grey cashmere sweater, tailored charcoal trousers, and understated leather loafers, he exuded an aura of quiet confidence, not ostentatious wealth. His watch, a Patek Philippe Calatrava, was a masterpiece of subtle engineering, its value known only to those who understood such things. Its quiet elegance was a perfect metaphor for the man himself. At 42, Graham Wilson was the founder and CEO of Aura Innovations, a tech behemoth that had quietly revolutionized data logistics and predictive analytics. His company was the invisible engine behind some of the world's largest e-commerce and shipping corporations. He wasn't a social media celebrity CEO. He was a strategist, a visionary, who operated in the high-stakes world of multi-billion-dollar acquisitions and disruptive technology. His face wasn't on magazine covers, but his name was whispered with a mixture of awe and fear in boardrooms from Silicon Valley to Shanghai. He was flying to Zurich for the final signing of the most significant deal of his career, the acquisition of Titan Holdings, a European conglomerate with a diverse portfolio that included manufacturing, shipping, and most notably, a majority stake in a well-known airline, Global Wings. The deal was codenamed Project Atlas, and it was set to redefine Aura's global footprint. He lowered his tablet where he'd been reviewing the final schematics of a new automated warehouse system and took a slow sip of his black coffee. He watched the ground crew maneuvering baggage carts and fuel trucks with practiced efficiency. He appreciated systems precision and order. Everything had its place. Everything had a function. It was a philosophy that had made him a billionaire. A polite announcement echoed through the lounge, signaling that Global Wings Flight 72 to Zurich was now boarding its VIP passengers. Graham gathered his leather briefcase, slid his tablet inside, and made his way to the private jet bridge. He greeted the gate agent with a nod and a quiet, "Good afternoon," his ticket. Seat 1A first-class suite scanned with a pleasant beep. On board the first-class cabin was a study in modern luxury. 8 private suites each with a lie-flat seat, a personal minibar, and a state-of-the-art entertainment system. Graham settled into 1A, placing his briefcase in the overhead bin and his suit jacket on the provided hanger. He declined the pre-departure champagne, opting instead for a bottle of still water. He needed a clear head. The signing was in less than 24 hours. As the other first-class passengers trickled in a Swiss banker, he recognized from a Davos conference A young actress scrolling furiously through her phone, an elderly couple speaking softly in German. Graham felt the familiar pre-flight sense of detachment. The airplane was a unique space, a temporary non-place between two worlds. For the next 8 hours, he was simply a passenger. The cabin door was about to close when 2 new figures appeared at the entrance, their voices sharp and agitated, slicing through the calm. The first was a flight attendant, a woman in her late 40s, with sharp features and hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her name tag read Brenda. The second was a man in his mid-50s, his face flushed with indignation. He was dressed in a rumpled but expensive-looking suit, a garish gold watch loose on his wrist. "This is completely unacceptable." The man boomed, his voice echoing in the enclosed space. "I am a Platinum Elite member. I paid for a first-class ticket, and you're telling me the cabin is full." "Brenda." The flight attendant adopted a tone of strained placation. "Sir, I understand your frustration. It appears there was a system error and overbooking in this cabin. We are trying to resolve it." The man who introduced himself loudly as Richard Sterling scoffed. "Resolve it? I'm not sitting in business class. My name is Richard Sterling of Sterling & Sons Legacy Investments. My time is valuable. I have a meeting in Zurich that I cannot miss. Someone is getting bumped. That's how this works." His eyes, small and predatory, scanned the cabin. They swept past the elderly couple, the banker, the actress, and then they landed on Graham Wilson in seat 1A. A flicker of something, a mixture of assumption and opportunity, crossed Sterling's face. He pointed a thick finger directly at Graham. "What about him?" he demanded, his voice laced with unmistakable implication. "He can be moved." Brenda's eyes followed his finger. She looked at Graham, her professional smile tightening at the edges. She saw a black man in a simple sweater. She saw none of the overt markers of status that Richard Sterling was so loudly proclaiming. Her mind, conditioned by 1,000 tiny prejudices, made a swift and terrible calculation. She approached Graham's suite. "Sir," she began, her voice losing its placating tone and taking on a formal, non-negotiable edge. "I'm afraid we have a delicate situation. We have a Platinum Elite passenger who has been displaced, and we need this seat." Graham looked up from his water, his expression unreadable. "I'm sorry, I think there's a mistake. This is my assigned seat. 1A. He gestured to his boarding pass, which was still tucked into the seat pocket. "Yes, I understand," Brenda said, her patience wearing thin. "But as I said, we have a situation. Mr. Sterling here is one of our most valued flyers. The system has made an error." She wasn't offering a choice. She was delivering a verdict. Richard Sterling loomed behind her, a smug look cementing on his florid face. "Look, just move the guy so we can get it going. Give him a few $100 in travel vouchers and send him to the back where he belongs." The final phrase hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Where he belongs. The cabin fell silent. The Swiss banker looked up from his newspaper, his eyebrows raised in disapproval. The young actress paused, her scrolling her mouth slightly agape. Graham's gaze remained fixed on Brenda. His heart rate didn't change. His breathing remained steady. But inside, a switch was flipped. The detached intellectual CEO receded, and a colder, more focused version of himself took its place. He had faced down corporate raiders, hostile boards, and cutthroat competitors. This was just crude, unadorned bigotry. "This man is being racist," Graham stated, his voice calm and even. "And you are enabling him. I have a valid ticket for this seat, and I will not be moving." Brenda's face hardened. She saw not a victim of prejudice but a problem passenger. "Sir, if you refuse to cooperate, I will have to get the purser. We cannot delay an international flight for one person." "I am not the one delaying it," Graham replied, his voice dropping to a near whisper that was somehow more intimidating than Sterling's shouting. "You are. By refusing to honor a paid ticket and by siding with a man who is judging another passenger based on his race." Brenda turned on her heel and marched toward the galley. "Mark, we have a situation in 1A. A moment later, Mark, the flight purser, appeared. He was a man who looked perpetually stressed, his smile a thin veneer over a deep well of anxiety. He listened intently to Brenda's one-sided, whispered account, his eyes darting nervously between the fuming Richard Sterling and the unnervingly calm Graham Wilson. "Sir," Mark said, approaching Graham, "let's be reasonable. We've had a computer glitch, a terrible mistake. We are prepared to offer you $800 in compensation and a seat in our premium economy section. It's a very comfortable seat." "The issue is not about comfort or compensation," Graham said, looking Mark directly in the eye. "It's about principle. You are asking me, the only black man in this cabin, to relinquish my paid confirmed seat for this gentleman who has made it clear why he singled me out. Do you not see the problem with that?" Mark faltered. He saw it, of course. In some distant, abstract part of his mind, he understood the injustice. But in the immediate, high-pressure reality of his job, he saw a loud, potentially litigious, platinum elite passenger, and an international flight that was now officially delayed. He saw the path of least resistance. "I'm sorry, sir," Mark said, his voice firming up as he made his choice. "But we need the seat. If you refuse to move, I will be forced to call ground security to have you removed from the aircraft." The threat was absolute. Graham looked around the cabin. He saw the averted eyes, the uncomfortable shifting. No one would intervene. In this metal tube, 35,000 feet from the rule of law, he understood he was alone. A slow, cold smile touched Graham's lips. It was a smile of profound disappointment, but also of dawning, crystalline clarity. He had tried reason. He had tried appealing to principle. Now another path would have to be taken. "Very well," he said softly. He stood up, his movements fluid and unhurried. He took his suit jacket from the hanger and draped it over his arm. He didn't look at Richard Sterling, who was now smirking triumphantly as he prepared to slide into the coveted seat. Graham's focus was entirely on Brenda and Mark. He paused beside them. "I want both of your names," he said. His voice was no longer conversational. It was the voice he used when closing a hostile negotiation. Brenda, emboldened by her victory, puffed out her chest slightly. "I am Brenda Miller, the lead flight attendant." "Mark Peterson, the purser," Mark added, though with less conviction. Graham nodded slowly, committing the names to memory. He then turned and walked down the aisle, past the rows of business class, past the curtain into premium economy, and all the way to the back of the plane. A flight attendant from the economy cabin, a young woman with a kind face, looked at him with sympathy and pointed him to an empty middle seat in the last row, sandwiched between a college student with a sprawling backpack and a woman who had already fallen asleep. Seat 38E, next to the lavatories. As he settled into the cramped seat, the triumphant sneer of Richard Sterling and the dismissive glare of Brenda Miller were seared into his mind. They thought they had won. They thought they had put him in his place. He buckled his seatbelt, the cheap fabric a stark contrast to the supple leather he had just left. He looked out the small, scratched porthole window as the engines of the Airbus A350 began to whine, the plane pushing back from the gate. They had no idea who he was. They had no idea what he was flying to Zurich to do, and they had no idea that in trying to put him in his place, they had just sealed their own fates and the fate of the very airline that employed them. Graham Wilson pulled out his phone. It wasn't a standard consumer model. It was a highly encrypted, satellite-capable device provided by his company's security division. He switched it to airplane mode to comply with regulations, but not before a single, pre-written, coded text message was sent. The recipient was Evelyn Reed, his chief operating officer and most trusted confidant. The message was simple: Project Atlas, execute Condition Omega, immediate effect. Condition Omega was a contingency they had developed but never expected to use. It was a clause in the acquisition agreement that allowed Aura Innovations to accelerate the final wire transfer and assume immediate overarching operational control of Titan Holdings and all its subsidiaries pending final signatures. It was designed for a hostile takeover scenario. It was now being used to respond to an act of blatant racism in Seat 1A. 5 minutes had passed since he'd been removed from his seat. The plane was now taxiing toward the runway. Down in the financial district of Manhattan, a multi-billion-dollar wire transfer was being initiated. The ownership of Global Wings Airlines was for all intents and purposes changing hands. Graham Wilson looked out the window. The game had changed, and he was now in control of the entire board. The ascent was smooth. Flight 72 broke through the clouds, revealing a brilliant, star-dusted sky. In the rear of the aircraft, the drone of the engines was a constant heavy hum. Graham Wilson ignored the cramped discomfort of Seat 38E. His mind was a world away, operating on a level of strategic calculus that few could comprehend. His phone buzzed discreetly in his pocket. A satellite data link routed through Aura's private network was now active. An encrypted message from Evelyn Reed appeared on the screen. Evelyn Omega initiated. Wire transfer confirmed. Funds cleared through the Swiss National Bank. We have control, Graham. Titan Holdings is ours. The press release is drafted and scheduled. What are your orders? Graham's fingers moved swiftly across the virtual keyboard. Graham, good. First, I want the full name and employee ID of the purser Mark Peterson and lead flight attendant Brenda Miller on Flight 72 JFK to ZRH. Second, get me the direct private cell number for the CEO of Global Wings. His name is Robert McKinley. Tell his assistant it is an urgent call from the new chairman of his parent company. Evelyn. On it. The crew manifest will take a few minutes to access through the new system. McKinley's number. I have it. Stand by. Up in first class. Richard Sterling was enjoying the fruits of his perceived victory. He had demanded and received a glass of 25-year-old Glenfiddich from Brenda, who served him with an almost conspiratorial smile. They were allies in the restoration of what they both saw as the natural order. Thank you for handling that so professionally, Sterling said, taking a large gulp of the scotch. Some people just don't understand their place, trying to cause a scene. It's my job to ensure the comfort of our most valued guests. Mr. Sterling, Brenda replied, her voice smooth. Some passengers can be difficult. We know how to handle them. She gave a knowing glance toward the back of the plane. She felt a surge of pride. She had de-escalated a problem, pacified a high-value customer, and kept the flight on schedule. She had done her job well. Purser Mark Peterson passed by doing a final check of the cabin. He gave Sterling a tight professional nod. Everything to your satisfaction, now, Mr. Sterling. Much better, Mark, much better. You and Brenda run a tight ship. Mark's shoulders relaxed for the first time since the confrontation. The crisis was averted. He had made the right call. The flight would be smooth from here on out. He would log the incident, noting the removed passenger was non-compliant, and that the issue was resolved with a standard compensation package. It was clean procedural. Corporate would see it as a textbook example of successful conflict resolution. Back in seat 38E. Graham's phone buzzed again. Evelyn got them. Brenda Miller. Employee ID 7419. Mark Peterson. Employee ID 60232. Both have long service records. Multiple commendations for customer service excellence. The irony is thick. Evelyn, I have McKinley's private number. Patching him through to your satellite line now. He has been informed of the acquisition. He is, and I quote his assistant, in a state of profound shock. A moment later, an incoming call icon appeared on Graham's screen. The caller ID read, Robert McKinley, CEO, Global Wings. Graham pressed the accept icon and put the phone to his ear. This is Robert McKinley. The voice was strained, laced with anxiety. McKinley had just been woken by a frantic call from his CFO, telling him that Titan Holdings had been acquired in a lightning-fast transaction and that the new owner was demanding to speak with him. Mr. McKinley, Graham began, his voice level and cold. My name is Graham Wilson. I am the CEO of Aura Innovations. As of approximately 15 minutes ago, my company is the new majority shareholder of Titan Holdings and therefore your new boss. I trust you've been briefed. There was a stunned silence on the other end, followed by frantic shuffling of papers. Mr. Wilson. Yes. Welcome. This is quite a surprise. We weren't expecting the finalization until tomorrow. I was looking forward to meeting you in Zurich. Our plans have changed, Graham said. I am in fact on one of your aircraft right now, Flight 72 from New York. A wave of relief washed over McKinley's voice. Oh, wonderful. Well, I hope the crew is taking excellent care of you. Please send my regards to the purser. Let me know if there's anything at all you need. This was the moment. Graham let the silence hang for a beat, making it heavy and uncomfortable. Mr. McKinley, he said, his voice dropping an octave. I'm calling you because I have just been subjected to one of the most disgusting and unprofessional displays of prejudice I have ever experienced, and it was by your crew. The relief in McKinley's voice evaporated, replaced by sheer panic. What do you mean? What happened? Graham recounted the events with detached, brutal precision. He described Richard Sterling's demand the use of the phrase, where he belongs, Brenda Miller's immediate complicity, and Mark Peterson's ultimate threat to have him removed by security. He concluded by stating his current location. I'm currently sitting in seat 38E, Mr. McKinley, a middle seat by the lavatories. My paid-for-confirmed first-class Suite 1A is currently occupied by the man who instigated this incident, who is at this moment likely enjoying a premium scotch served by the flight attendant who racially profiled me. McKinley was sputtering. Mr. Wilson. I am speechless. This is horrifying. Unacceptable. I am so sorry. This is not what Global Wings stands for. What your company claims to stand for and what it is are two very different things, Mr. McKinley. Your company culture, the one that you have curated as CEO, allowed this to happen. It empowered your crew to believe that their decision was not only acceptable, but correct. This isn't a glitch, it's a feature of the system you've built. "I will handle this, I swear." McKinley stammered, his mind racing. "I will have the purser moved. We will have you reinstated to your seat immediately. The crew will be dealt with. I will personally fly to Zurich to apologize." "No," Graham said flatly. "You will do no such thing. My presence in this seat is now a data point, an audit. I will remain here for the duration of the flight. It will serve as a reminder of the reality of the customer experience your airline provides." Graham continued his voice, leaving no room for argument. "Here is what you will do. You will contact your chief of operations. You will have him meet this flight when it lands at the gate in Zurich, not at a private terminal at the main gate. You will give him the names Brenda Miller and Mark Peterson. You will instruct him that upon my deplaning, he is to inform them both that they are suspended pending termination effective immediately. Their security credentials and access to all Global Wings property are to be revoked on the spot. Is that clear? Suspended, pending termination, on the spot," McKinley whispered, horrified at the breach of protocol. "But HR procedures." "Mr. McKinley," Graham interrupted, his voice like ice. "Consider this your first directive under new ownership. The HR procedures will be followed to the letter, but their outcome is preordained. They humiliated a passenger and exposed this company to a lawsuit that would cost it millions. More importantly, they humiliated me. I am your new chairman. Their careers with Global Wings are over. See to it. I will know if you hesitate." "Yes. Yes, of course, Mr. Wilson. I will make the call right now. One more thing, Mr. McKinley. I want the name of the passenger currently in seat 1A. Richard Sterling. I want him flagged in your system. He is to be permanently banned from flying on Global Wings or any of its partner airlines effective the moment this plane touches down. His behavior is a liability." "It's done," McKinley said, his voice now a mixture of terror and subservience. "Consider it done." "We will speak again in Zurich," Graham said, and ended the call. He leaned his head back against the uncomfortable headrest and closed his eyes. The first domino had fallen. A cascade was about to begin. The crew in the front of the plane had no idea that their professional lives had just been dismantled mid-flight. They continued their service blissfully unaware that their boss had just received a call from his new boss, who was sitting by the toilets in the back of their own plane. Karma, Graham mused, was often portrayed as a cosmic force, but sometimes it was just a satellite phone call from 35,000 feet. The crew hadn't been fired 5 minutes after the incident. Their termination had been ordered 5 minutes after the incident. The result was the same. The delivery would just be far more dramatic. The remaining 7 hours of the flight passed uneventfully, at least on the surface. For the passengers and crew, it was a routine transatlantic crossing. Drinks were served, meals were eaten, movies were watched. For Graham Wilson, it was a period of intense, silent work. Connected to Aura's servers, he, along with Evelyn and his executive team, began laying the groundwork for the complete restructuring of Titan Holdings. Memos were drafted, new org charts were created, and a list of key personnel to retain or dismiss was compiled. He was disassembling and rebuilding a corporate empire from a cramped economy seat. In first class, Brenda and Mark continued to dote on Richard Sterling. They refilled his scotch, brought him extra desserts, and laughed at his self-important anecdotes. They were cementing their relationship with a valued customer, blind to the fact that their actions were being relayed in real time to the highest echelons of power. They were actors in a play, unaware that the script had been rewritten and their roles were about to be cut. As the plane began its descent into Zurich, the captain's voice came over the intercom, announcing the local time and weather. The seatbelt sign illuminated. Brenda and Mark began their final sweep of the cabin, collecting trash and ensuring all seats were in the upright position. When Brenda passed row 38, her eyes met Graham's for a fleeting moment. There was no apology in her gaze, only a cool professional indifference. He was a problem that had been solved. Graham simply looked back at her, his expression placid. He knew something she didn't. He knew that in less than 30 minutes her entire world would implode. The plane touched down at Zurich Airport, with a gentle bump taxiing smoothly towards its assigned gate B43. As the aircraft docked and the engine spooled down, the familiar chime rang through the cabin, signaling that it was safe to unbuckle. Up front, Richard Sterling was already on his feet, grabbing his coat and briefcase, eager to be the first one off. He gave Brenda a final smug nod. "Excellent service," he declared loudly. "I'll be sure to put in a good word for you." "Thank you, Mr. Sterling. We look forward to welcoming you aboard again soon," Brenda replied with a practiced smile. The jet bridge connected with a soft thud, and the cabin door was opened. But instead of the usual ground staff, a group of 4 men stood waiting just outside the aircraft. One was clearly in charge, a distinguished-looking man in a sharply tailored suit, his face pale and etched with anxiety. This was David Chen, the Chief Operating Officer of Global Wings. He had taken the first available corporate jet from Frankfurt the moment he received the panicked call from CEO Robert McKinley. Behind him were 2 stern-faced airport security officers and a man in a Global Wings uniform holding a tablet. Mark Peterson, the purser, stepped forward to greet them. "Mr. Chen." "What a surprise. Is there an issue?" David Chen's eyes swept past Mark, scanning the first-class cabin with frantic energy. He was looking for Graham Wilson. When he didn't see him, a fresh wave of panic washed over his face. He ignored Mark completely. "Where is he?" Chen demanded of the flight attendant at the door. "Where is Mr. Wilson?" The flight attendant looked confused. "Wilson, I don't know that name, sir. These are our first-class passengers." Richard Sterling, impatient, pushed forward. "Excuse me. I have a meeting to get to." David Chen held up a hand, physically blocking Sterling's path. "Sir, please wait." His eyes continued their desperate search down the aisle of the plane. And then he saw him. Emerging from the economy cabin, walking calmly and deliberately, was Graham Wilson. Chen's blood ran cold. It was true. The new owner of their entire company had been sitting in the back of the plane. He pushed past a bewildered Mark and Brenda and hurried down the aisle, his movements almost a half jog. The other passengers, now standing and gathering their luggage, watched in confusion. Chen reached Graham as he arrived at the exit. "Mr. Wilson," Chen said, his voice trembling slightly. He extended a hand which Graham did not take. "I am David Chen CEO of Global Wings. On behalf of the entire airline, I cannot begin to express how profoundly sorry I am. This is an unforgivable failure on our part." The first-class cabin fell into a stunned silence. Richard Sterling froze his briefcase halfway into the aisle. Brenda Miller's professional smile vanished, replaced by a mask of utter disbelief. Mark Peterson's face went ashen. They all stared at the man in the simple grey sweater, now being addressed with such frantic deference by one of the airline's most powerful executives. Graham looked at Chen, his expression unmoved. "Apologies are insufficient, Mr. Chen. What I require is action." He then turned his head slightly, his gaze falling upon Brenda and Mark, who stood frozen like statues in the galley. Are these the employees? He asked, his voice cutting through the silence. Chen swallowed hard. Yes, sir. He nodded to the man with the tablet. Brenda Miller, Mark Peterson. Please step forward. Shakily, the two flight attendants did as they were told. Their faces were a mixture of terror and confusion. As per a directive from the office of the CEO, Chen began, his voice formal and grim. You are both hereby suspended from all duties, effective immediately. You will be escorted from the airport by security. Your employee credentials have been deactivated. You are not to access any company property or communicate with any Global Wings staff. A full investigation into the events of Flight 72 will be conducted, and you will be contacted by Human Resources regarding the termination of your employment. Brenda's jaw dropped. Termination? What for what? For doing my job, she gasped, looking from Chen to Graham, a horrifying realization finally dawning in her eyes. You? Who are you? Graham met her gaze. I am the man you removed from his seat, he said simply. And as of this morning, I am the new chairman of the board of the company that owns this airline. You didn't just do your job, Ms. Miller. You demonstrated a profound lack of judgment and a character flaw that I will not tolerate in any corner of my organization. You are a liability. So is your colleague. Mark Peterson looked like he was about to faint. His career, built over 2 decades, had just evaporated on a tarmac in Zurich. The 2 security officers stepped forward, gently but firmly flanking Brenda and Mark. This way, please, one of them said. As they were led off the jet bridge, stripped of their dignity in front of their passengers and colleagues, the reality of their situation crashed down upon them. It was over. Now only one piece of business remained. Graham's cold gaze shifted to Richard Sterling, who was trying to make himself small to somehow blend in with the brushed metal walls of the cabin. And Mr. Richard Sterling, Graham said, his voice resonating through the cabin. David Chen immediately checked the name on his tablet. Mr. Sterling, Chen said, stepping towards him. I am instructed to inform you that, due to your conduct on this flight, you have been permanently banned from all future travel on Global Wings and our Sky Alliance partners. Your Platinum Elite status is revoked. A formal notice will be sent to your office. Sterling's face, already flushed, turned a deep apoplectic purple. Banned? You can't do that. I'm your best customer. It was him, he sputtered, pointing a shaking finger at Graham. He was the one causing the problem. Graham took a slow step towards him. He was no longer just the man from seat 38E. He was Graham Wilson, CEO of Aura Innovations, a man who commanded legions and moved markets with a word. Power radiated from him, an almost tangible force. Mr. Sterling, Graham said, his voice dangerously quiet. You built your life on the assumption that your money and your skin color put you at the top of a hierarchy. You saw me and you saw someone you could displace. You didn't see a man. You saw an obstacle to your own comfort. Let me be very clear. Your legacy investment firm, Sterling & Sons, has a number of pending logistics contracts with subsidiaries of Titan Holdings. Those contracts are now under my review. I assure you I will be reviewing them with extreme prejudice. You picked the wrong person to bully. Now get off my plane. The finality in his voice was absolute. Richard Sterling, utterly defeated and publicly humiliated, grabbed his briefcase and stumbled off the plane. His triumphant arrival in Zurich turned into a walk of shame. The remaining passengers deplaned in a state of shock, whispering amongst themselves, trying to piece together the corporate drama they had just witnessed. Finally, the cabin was empty, save for Graham and David Chen. Mr. Wilson, Chen began again. I have a car waiting to take you to your hotel. Your luggage is being collected. Good, Graham said. Finally, looking at Chen with a glimmer of something other than ice. Your handling of that was efficient, Mr. Chen. Now the real work begins. The culture that allowed 2 of your senior crew members to think their actions were acceptable runs deep. We are going to rip it out, root and stem. Your new job as of this moment is to lead that effort. You will report directly to me. Don't disappoint me. No, sir. I won't. Chen said, a renewed sense of purpose and fear in his eyes. Graham Wilson, dressed in his simple grey sweater, walked off the plane and into the terminal, leaving the wreckage of several lives and careers in his wake. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't made a scene. He had simply allowed the consequences of others' actions to find them delivered with the swift, unforgiving precision of a perfectly executed business strategy. The karma had been delivered not by fate, but by FedEx overnight, and with a tracking number. The story of Flight 72 did not simply deplane in Zurich. It detonated. Before Graham Wilson had even cleared customs, the incident had morphed from a contained event into a corporate legend whispered through the encrypted channels of Global Wing's internal communications. At the airline's New York headquarters, a low-grade panic was beginning to simmer. Rumors, fragmented and wild, circulated among the cubicles, a VIP incident. The COO scrambling to meet a flight, 2 senior crew members marched off the plane by security. No one knew the whole story, but everyone understood that something seismic had occurred. Then, at 9:00 a.m., sharp Zurich time, the official press release from Aura Innovations was launched onto the global newswires. The first paragraphs were standard, meticulously crafted, corporate prose announcing the successful acquisition of Titan Holdings, full of optimistic jargon about synergies, vertical integration, and shareholder value. But it was the addendum, a section clearly bearing the hand of a different author, that turned the industry on its head. The addendum, personally dictated by Graham to his COO Evelyn Reed, was a masterstroke of strategic communication. It announced that the new leadership's very first act was the launch of a comprehensive top-to-bottom review of customer service protocols and corporate culture at its subsidiary Global Wings. It cited with chilling vagueness a serious incident of passenger mistreatment on a transatlantic flight. The release then declared the immediate implementation of a new non-negotiable zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind. To underscore the point, it announced the formation of a new division, the Office of Passenger Dignity, to be helmed personally by COO David Chen, who was tasked with ensuring that every passenger was treated with unimpeachable respect. The message was an earthquake. In boardrooms and newsrooms, analysts and journalists read between the lines with ease. This wasn't a standard corporate reshuffle. This was a statement of intent. A public declaration that the old ways of doing business at Global Wings were over. The king was dead, long live the king, and the new king was clearly on a mission. For Brenda Miller and Mark Peterson, the journey back to New York was a long, suffocating nightmare. Stripped of their authority and their uniforms, they were booked into economy seats on a partner airline seated rows apart. The familiar cabin, once their kingdom, was now a prison of shame. Fellow crew members who knew them averted their eyes, offering no comfort. The professional camaraderie they had taken for granted was gone, replaced by a wall of silence. Brenda stared blankly out the window, replaying the scene at the Zurich gate over and over. Disbelief warred with a rising tide of indignant rage. Who was that man? How could a single passenger a man in a simple sweater wield such earth-shattering power. She had been following procedure handling a seating dispute, pacifying a high-value customer. In her mind, she had done everything right. The injustice of it all burned in her chest. Mark, meanwhile, simply crumbled. He sat hunched in his seat, his face pale and clammy. The confident authority he projected as a purser had been a fragile costume, and now it was torn away, revealing the anxious, conflict-averse man beneath. He had made a choice, the easy choice, and it had cost him everything. He saw the cold, disappointed eyes of Graham Wilson every time he closed his own. Their HR meetings were not the bureaucratic formality they might have once been. They were surgical procedures conducted in a cold, glass-walled conference room by a senior HR executive who represented the new, unyielding regime. Brenda went first, armed with defiance. "I am filing a Gry Wilson for wrongful termination," she announced, her voice tight. "I was de-escalating a situation caused by a system error. I have 22 years of exemplary service and countless commendations." The HR executive, a woman named Ms. Albright, didn't flinch. She slid a thick file across the table. "Mr. Miller, your service record has been noted. However, your actions on Flight 72 have superseded it. We have statements from multiple witnesses." She tapped the file. "From the passenger in 2B, a Mr. Klaus Richter, who states he overheard Mr. Sterling use racially charged language, which you then ignored. We have a statement from the passenger in 3A and Ms. Chloe Sinclair, who states that you and Mr. Peterson clearly and deliberately targeted the only black man in the cabin. We also have a formal report from a junior flight attendant, Maria Sanchez, who states she witnessed you treat Mr. Wilson with open contempt after he was reseated." Brenda's defiance began to crack. They don't understand the pressure. Mr. Sterling was a Platinum Elite member. Mr. Sterling's status is irrelevant. Ms. Albright cut in her voice sharp. "Your job was to resolve a seating dispute, not to enforce a social hierarchy. You failed to protect a passenger from harassment, and you became complicit in it. You were given a choice between doing what was right and what was easy. You chose wrong. That is not a procedural error, Ms. Miller. That is a character failure. Global Wings, under its new ownership, has no place for it." When Mark Peterson's turn came, he offered no fight. He sat defeated as Ms. Albright detailed his own failures, his refusal to properly investigate the situation, his deference to the aggressor, and his ultimate unacceptable threat to have a paying customer removed by security. His career built over 2 decades was dismantled in 20 minutes. They were fired for cause. Their severance, their pensions, their lifetime flight benefits all voided. The news spread through the industry like wildfire. Brenda Miller, once a powerful lead attendant who could make or break a junior crew member's day, found her applications met with polite, swift rejections. The digital black mark on her record was invisible, but absolute. She had become a case study, a cautionary tale whispered in crew lounges about what happens when you misjudge a passenger so completely. Graham's justice, however, was far from finished. His attention, cold and focused, now turned to Richard Sterling. From his presidential suite at the Dolder Grand overlooking the shimmering surface of Lake Zurich, Graham convened a secure video conference. On his screen, an array of anxious faces appeared, the presidents and CEOs of the European manufacturing and logistics firms that were part of the Titan Holdings portfolio. They were all powerful men in their own right, but today they were a captive audience. Graham, dressed in a crisp white shirt, looked relaxed, but his eyes were like chips of obsidian. He didn't begin by shouting or making demands. He started by laying out his vision for Aura Innovations and its new European wing. He spoke of ethics, of brand synergy, of the public-facing responsibilities of modern corporations. Aura Innovations. He said, his voice a calm, resonant baritone. Believes that our partners should reflect our values. We build our reputation on integrity, foresight, and respect. A brand is a fragile ecosystem. It can be poisoned by association with elements that are outdated, unpredictable, toxic. He paused, letting the word toxic hang in the virtual space. Recently, he continued, I had a personal encounter with Mr. Richard Sterling of Sterling & Sons Legacy Investments. His conduct was a profound liability. It demonstrated a culture of arrogance and prejudice that belongs to a bygone era. That kind of thinking, that kind of behavior is a risk. It's a risk to your brand, and therefore it is a risk to mine. He leaned forward slightly. Sterling & Sons has numerous lucrative contracts with many of you. These contracts are, of course, now under my review. I expect all of our partners to meet the highest ethical standards. I trust you will all reevaluate your current business relationships and ensure they align with the forward-thinking principles of this new organization. He didn't need to say more. The threat was unspoken, but perfectly clear. The subsidiary presidents, desperate to impress their formidable new chairman, understood the directive. To continue their relationship with Sterling & Sons, at least with Richard Sterling at the helm, was to place themselves in direct opposition to Graham Wilson. It was a choice between a portfolio of contracts and loyalty to an old business associate. It was no choice at all. The phone calls to the Sterling & Sons boardroom began the next day. They were polite, couched in the bloodless language of corporate strategy. One president spoke of mitigating reputational exposure. Another mentioned a strategic realignment of our vendor partnerships. A third simply stated that their future contracts would be contingent on a demonstrable commitment to modern ethical standards. A week later, the board of Sterling & Sons held an emergency meeting. Richard Sterling strode in, expecting to rally his allies against what he saw as a personal vendetta. Instead, he found a room of grim-faced men who wouldn't meet his eye. The chairman, a man he had played golf with for 20 years, cleared his throat. Richard, he began, your recent public incident has caused significant damage to our client relationships. Several of our key partners have made it clear that your continued presence in a leadership role represents an unacceptable risk to their business, and therefore to ours. This is absurd, Sterling boomed, his face turning crimson. This is because of that man on the plane. You're going to let him dictate how we run our company. He is not just a man on a plane, Richard, the chairman replied tiredly. He is now the man who controls the companies that pay our bills. We have a fiduciary duty to our shareholders. The board has voted. We are asking for your resignation. Sterling stared aghast. When he refused, sputtering with rage, he was unceremoniously fired by the very men who had once been his peers. He lost his job, his title, his lavish expense account, and the one thing he valued above all, his status. He had tried to put a man in his place, only to be surgically excised from his own. But Graham knew that punishment was only half the equation. Destruction without creation was just vengeance. He was a builder. He summoned David Chen to Zurich for a face-to-face meeting. Chen arrived humbled and terrified, but Graham put him at ease. I am not interested in scapegoats, David, Graham said. I am interested in solutions. That incident happened on your watch, so you are going to fix it. The Office of Passenger Dignity is not a PR stunt. It will be the most powerful division in this airline. You will have my full backing and an unlimited budget. I want you to tear down the old culture and build a new one. I want to reward empathy as much as we reward efficiency." Then Graham made his most important move. "I want the name of the flight attendant from economy who was kind to me. The one who looked at me with sympathy, not suspicion." David Chen found her name in the report. Maria Sanchez. A junior attendant only 2 years into her career, but her file was filled with unsolicited praise from passengers noting her compassion and warmth. Graham had Chen call her personally. Maria was on layover in London when she got the call. She assumed she was in trouble for filing a report against senior crew. Instead, the COO of the airline was on the line offering her a promotion to a management position within his new office. "Mr. Wilson was impressed by your character," Chen explained. "He believes that the change we need at this airline will come from people like you. He wants your perspective at the heart of this new initiative." Tears welled in Maria's eyes. She had simply done what she thought was right, showing a small kindness to a man being treated unfairly. She never imagined it would be seen, let alone rewarded at the highest possible level. 2 weeks later, Graham Wilson flew from Zurich back to New York. He deliberately booked seat 1A on Global Wings. The change was palpable. The crew was sharp, diverse, and moved with a renewed sense of purpose. The purser, a young, intelligent woman fast-tracked under the new merit-based system, greeted him by name. "Mr. Wilson," she said with a genuine smile, "it is an honor to have you with us. Please let me know if there is anything at all that can make your flight more comfortable." As the plane reached cruising altitude, he leaned back in his lie-flat seat and looked out at the vast blue canvas of the sky. He had faced down an ugly, casual act of racism, and had responded not with an emotional outburst, but with overwhelming systemic force. He had not just punished the guilty. He had rewarded the worthy and had set in motion a fundamental change in a billion-dollar company. He had proven that in the cold, hard calculus of the world, nothing corrects an imbalance of perceived power like an absolute, unassailable imbalance of actual power. And he had done it all without ever raising his voice. This story serves as a powerful, visceral reminder that the world often judges us on its own flawed terms. But true power isn't about the seat you're in, it's about the moves you can make. Graham Wilson didn't just get an apology, he became the storm. He dismantled the system that wronged him and rebuilt it in the image of respect. The karma that hit the crew and the arrogant passenger wasn't luck. It was a consequence delivered with the cold, hard precision of a corporate takeover. It's a stark lesson that prejudice and arrogance can have a price tag far higher than you can ever imagine. If this story of dramatic justice resonated with you, please hit that like button to let us know. Share it with someone who needs to hear that sometimes the good guys, the quiet, strategic ones, win in the most spectacular way. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another story of real-life drama and hard-hitting karma.